Good morning, welcome to Sports Radio 1310, The Ticket. George DiGianni, Train Station Fitness Show. Interesting show today. Even if you're not a world-class athlete or trying to become a world-class athlete, this is a show you can really benefit from if you're a parent, if you're someone who does exercise and you're trying to push yourself. Right now it's summertime. Maybe you push yourself a little bit harder when you're bicycling or you're out sprinting or you're moving weight in the gym and you're trying to perform a very high amount of repetitions, and your workout partner next to you cannot perform as many repetitions in the same time allotted. Is it because they're bigger, they have more muscle, are they stronger, or are they just innately more explosive, faster, they have more speed, they're able to perform more in a shorter period of time? And so my guest today is Dr. Michael Lombardo. He's a professor of biology at Grand Valley State University. And he said, there are certain things we cannot teach. We can help enhance, but we cannot teach. And so some of the questions I have is, if you're a parent and you're looking to guide your child toward a better sport, a sport that they would excel in, what would you look at if you're a parent in your child to say, hey, they would do better at this or that, instead of trying to push them to do something that they might not have been as talented to do when you were young, or vice versa? And so if you can't teach speed or explosiveness, does that mean you should just give up? This is not just for parents, as I mentioned earlier, with children or who are going to have children and wonder, but it's also for yourself, the exerciser. What will you innately be good at? Find out what that is, identify that, and then maybe move in that direction. So if you're really meant to be a sprinter, should you really go out and run a marathon? Same thing with cycling and other type of sports. What I want to find out today is there a difference or there are similarities in his studies for people who would benefit playing golf to being a better pitcher, having a faster fastball? And these are some of the things we'll discuss with him coming up next. So we'll talk with Dr. Michael Lombardi about his study and speed, how you can benefit and what to look for to know that you're performing not only your best because there's practice involved in coaching, but are you in the right sport for you or your child? It's 7:04 Sports Radio 1310, The Ticket. 712 Sports Radio 1310, The Ticket. George DiGianni, Train Station Fitness Show. I think this is a very interesting show today because it really helps to enhance some of the innate abilities that you have, and maybe also validate why you have been particularly good in a specific sport or event, and a friend or friends of yours have not been as good for this topic today. And we're talking about speed and your innate ability to be faster, whatever faster is, not necessarily a sprinter, but faster than most people. And if you were to exercise that by practicing and being coached, you would be able to enhance your skills, but not necessarily be a faster person. So on the show today, we have Dr. Michael Lombardo, who is a professor of biology at Grand Valley State University. Good morning, Doc.
Good morning. Happy to be here.
Thank you for sharing this with us today. This is an interesting topic because it's been studied for quite a while, and you seem to take a different approach. What was your intended goal, first of all, in performing this study?
Well, the reason why Rob Diener, my co-author, and I conducted this study is because we noticed in the not just the sports literature, but in the popular media, this idea that was first proposed by a psychologist at Florida State University named Carl Erickson, and then popularized by Malcolm Gladwell, who's a well-known writer, that there's really no such thing as innate talent. And this is the idea that virtually every healthy individual is endowed with all of the necessary skills or abilities to become an expert performer if they would just put in 10 years of what's called deliberate practice, which means really effortful practice with feedback constantly from a coach, and this adds up to about 10,000 hours. And this 10-year rule has been popularized by Malcolm Gladwell. As a biologist, that didn't make very much sense to me.
So let me interrupt for a moment, Doc. Malcolm Gladwell wrote a book called The Outliers, and it's a story of success, which examines the factors that contribute to high levels of success. And what Malcolm Gladwell did, because I read this book, and thank you for reminding me of this, by the way, and I thought it was a great book. What Malcolm Gladwell said, just to paraphrase what you were saying, is if you put in these 10 years or 10,000 hours of work to become an expert in any field, whether that's being an athlete or to a chess player, that you will become an expert. And, you know, I think I was kind of redundant with what I just said, but you said that your studies, well, you didn't say this, but you've proven this through your studies, that it kind of flies in the face of the message for the athletes and speed specifically, that if you put in 50,000 hours of training and practicing more than anyone else, you're never going to be Usain Bolt if that's your idol. And basically, if a child is looking toward a person like Usain Bolt to be their idol, and they don't have the ability to be as fast as him, they should just take up knitting. Isn't that what you said?
Well, kind of. But see, let's make it a little simpler. So, every person, every healthy person on the planet has been involved in a running race at some point when they were a child or youth. And we all know from our own experiences that some of us are just faster than others. Mm-hmm. And so what we set out to show is based on our experiences watching sport, playing sport, is that there are some people that are naturally faster, naturally stronger than others. And so what that means is that the elite athletes are going to be, in general, taken from that pool of individuals who are naturally faster, naturally stronger, and so forth. And so what we did was then to look at elite sprinting, world-class sprinting, to see whether there were any athletes in that group that fit what we think of as that 10-year rule, where there's some individuals that work really hard and became fast. And of course, that's not the case. Our results were very consistent in that every Olympic champion that we looked at, for which there was information, every one of the top 20 male sprinters in the United States, every single one of them was recognized as being not just fast, but extraordinarily fast as a child or a youth.
So I'd like to validate that with my own experience. I've mentioned this on the radio, it was many years ago, and when I was a lot younger, I'm 46 now, I've always had that speed and explosive power, and I ran a 4.34 in the 40. Well, if you know anything about the 40-yard dash, which football coaches measure you with your speed, those are NFL times, and I did this at a young age. I think high school and just out of high school. And so it's like you said, I've always just been fast, and some people are just fast. And one of the things you pointed out is someone who's fast at a young age is going to be fast or even faster as they get older, and they hone those skills by being coached and practicing.
Exactly right.
Right?
Yeah, exactly right. So the 40-yard dash time that you ran in high school was comparable to what pro football players were.
Right.
And so what we see is that individuals who make it to the upper levels, the elite levels, were extraordinarily fast at an early age. And so really it's a matter of both physical maturation, you get bigger and you get stronger, and then you hone your skills with coaching. But what that also means, the flip side of that is, and this is a quote from a rugby coach from Australia, who said, we've tested tens of thousands of kids, and we've never seen anybody who was slow get fast.
So doesn't that also say, yeah, exactly. Doesn't that also conversely share the importance of people who are sprinters that want to run marathons, that you'll never run a marathon, or if you do, it'd be quite challenging because you're not built the same way physiologically?
Right, that's right. You're predisposed for sprint and power events, and so while you could run the marathon distance, that you're certainly not going to be able to, run it probably under 3 hours.
Right. I remember when, just going back to my experience again, if I needed to beat someone in the 100-yard dash, it was much more difficult, and it didn't always happen because I was that shorter not zero, but I guess 0 to 40 or 0 to 50 yards. And if it was anything past 100 yards, well, I'm just done. I'm out. And that's just how I've been built. So it actually translated into benefiting with all of the 20 years or so that I was involved in martial arts and weightlifting, very, very explosive, which brings me to this question. When discussing the topic of speed and your study particularly, can we also include explosive capabilities or focused intent with a golfer who wants to drive the ball further, a pitcher who wants to have a faster fastball, a hockey player who goes from a standstill position to needing to be very explosive to get to the puck or the other side of the field, court, whatever they call it?
Right on. Yeah. So those are all involved with explosive activities, and so all of those are associated with the same sorts of physical attributes that are evident in sprinters. So it involves fast muscle contractions and very strong muscle contractions, and so it certainly seems as we look across any sort of population of individuals that there are some people that are predisposed for those sorts of activities and other people who are predisposed for more endurance-based activities, and there seems to also be some interesting genetic correlates of this with some different genes in which variants of those genes are associated with explosive activities, and other variants of those genes that are associated with more endurance type of events like long distance running, marathon running.
Right. As you reminded me about David Epstein's book, The Sports Gene, very good book. If you don't have the hardware, all of the software, which is, as you mentioned, the practice, the training, and the coaching, will minimize your chances of reaching elite level performance in sports. And I really love that analogy. If you don't have the hardware, it doesn't matter how much you practice, is what you're saying. If you don't have that innate ability, you can practice 30,000 hours and you're only going to make it to a certain level. Again, go back to what I said earlier. Does that mean we just give up? And I don't think that's the answer. And before you go on with that, because I'd like for you to share what that means for people who just don't have that talent and will never have that. Let's not talk about talent, because it's not a matter of talent as much as it is your innate ability to perform at a certain level. What does that person do? How can we help them if they're not going to have this explosiveness that they'd like to have? We'll talk more with Dr. Lombardo coming up next at 7:23, Sports Radio 1310, The Ticket. 7:31, Sports Radio 1310, The Ticket, George DiGianni, Train Station Fitness Show. Talking with my guest, Dr. Michael Lombardo today. Professor of Biology at Grand Valley State University. We are discussing whether or not you have the speed, the explosiveness, the innate talent to be in the position of sports that you're in, or to be in a specific sport. Or whether it would be better for you to either leave that sport or the position within the sport to go to a different position. What I left Dr. Lombardo with was the question about people who don't have that talent that they'd like to have for their specific sport, whether or not they should just give up, or how they basically identify with where they are and what they would be better at. Dr. Lombardo.
Yeah, and a really good way to think about this is to think about where most of us are, right? And so if you think about, what we wrote about were sprinters, only somewhere between 40 and 50 men qualify even to compete in the Olympics. Less than 1/10 of 1% of high school students make it to the professional leagues, whether it's baseball, football, hockey, or become professional athletes of some sort or the other, or make it to the Olympics. So that means the great majority of us are in that group that are not going to be those sorts of elite athletes. That doesn't mean you should give up, because there's a lot to gain from sport, even if you don't make it to the upper levels, right? So there's you form great friendships.
Camaraderie, yeah.
You develop great habits for healthy living, stay in shape, of course, which is healthy. I tell my students, I had a student years ago who came to me with her mother, and she was going to enroll at Grand Valley, and she was transferring from another school, and she was a very good volleyball player, and she was thinking about stopping playing volleyball and concentrating on her studies. She was a very good student. And I told her that one of my biggest regrets was that midway through my college career, I did the same thing. I dropped off the track team in college and concentrated on my studies. And it was a really big regret, because I missed a lot of fun, a lot of training. I cut short some friendships that I had. And I was never going to be a star athlete or at the elite level. So I think there's a lot to be gained from participating, because really, in reality, very few of us are going to make it to those upper levels.
So, Dr. Lombardo, you may not have studied this, but you may be aware of it just because of being a person who was involved with that mindset and also being an athlete at some level when you were younger. Is there an injury associated with people, or potential injury associated for people who are trying to be explosive but don't have that innate ability to be explosive? So if someone should be running marathons or anything long distance, but they're trying to be more explosive, are they more apt to be injured?
I don't know. I can't comment on that. I know they won't get fast.
Right, they won't get the results they might be looking for.
Yeah,
so
they won't get the results, and we can all think of our own. We can all think of our own experiences in these, and when we were playing little league baseball or playing sports in high school, or even playing sports in college. I mean, you seem like, and you're really pretty convinced, and you really probably are just working as hard as the guy or the girl next to you, and they're just faster, they're just a little bit stronger, they just hit the ball a little farther, they just hit the ball a little more often, they make more shots. So there's just differences between individuals, and I think we do better by accepting some of those differences rather than, as we say at the end of our paper, you don't want to get to the position where you say, darn, I didn't make the Olympics. Maybe it's because I didn't work hard enough. Well, maybe you did work hard enough, but you just don't have the innate physical prowess to succeed at those levels. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's just variation in the human population, as just as there's variation in the population of all different, other different organisms.
So when we talk about accepting where we are, what advice do you have for parents who see that their child is beginning to have an interest in sports? What I would like to know, let's say I'm a parent and I'm watching my child play sports. Is there something I can look for to say this might not be the best position and or sport for them? Let me expose them to something that might be better for them by watching how they have more talent to do X.
Sure. Yeah, that's an excellent point, and certainly if you read the sports science literature and even the popular literature about this, I mean, one of the things that sports scientists and coaches are kind of both despairing at and also emphasizing is that kids today get focused in on one or very few sports. So I'm a little bit older than you. Certainly when I was young, you played everything, what it looks like is that when you watch young children play sports or high school kids play sports, if your child is not dominating the competition at whatever age, they're probably not going to become an expert in that particular sport. Now, of course, there's variation because everybody physically matures at slightly different ages.
Well, there's also the psychological aspect, and maybe they don't care enough Maybe they don't feel, they don't have that mental toughness to want to excel. So there's obviously other variables, but I know what you're getting at. If they don't have that competitive and as well as innate ability, you may want to think about whatever it is you're going to say.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, exactly. Maybe switching to another sport. I mean, as you just said, there are lots of things that are or factors that are involved. It's not just physical ability. I remember reading an article one time about Pete Rose, the baseball player, who said, you know, the difference between him and other players was that, many other players, was that a lot of people practice what they're good at. The way you get better is practice those things that you're not good at. Mm-hmm. And some people just, you know, they just don't do it. They don't have that obsessiveness to excel, that obsessiveness in certain sports like football, for example, and other sports that involve physical contact to dominate other individuals. So there's psychological factors that are involved as well as the physical factors. And of course, there's also this aspect of you know, people tend to do things that we're successful at, right?
Right.
So, and to stop doing things that we're not successful at. And so there's also that kind of positive feedback. So as you move from one level to the next, individuals that are good or better than others keep going, and everybody else starts to, you know, periodically drop out. And that always reminds me of, there's a really good line in the movie Moneyball about Billy Beane and the Oakland Athletics. And Billy Beane, of course, was a blue chip recruit to play baseball in the major leagues for the New York Mets. I was a Mets fan when I was a kid. And one of the scouts tells him at one point that, you know, Billy, everybody gets told that it's time to stop playing. Sometimes you get told when you're 18. Sometimes you get told when you're 28. Sometimes you get told when you're 38. But everybody gets told it's time to stop. And for most of us, we get told, you know, it's probably not worth pursuing at an early age unless you make it to those elite levels, because you just can't compete. And you can't compete either because you don't have the physical ability, or you don't have the mental toughness, you know, and you don't have some of the psychological factors that are necessary to succeed at the highest levels.
You know, we can look at people with that explosive talent and see how they might not practice enough, or maybe they do practice enough, but their counterpart, let's say, who doesn't have the same exact talent as them, let's say in more than one area, might be more strategic. And that more strategic person might wind up excelling in that position or in that sport just because they're using their mind more. I'm horrible with sports, so this is where I tend to screw things up. But there were two football players, Deion Sanders, and who was the Rocket? Bullet.
Oh, Ishmael. Yeah, right. Yes. Yeah. You mean Bob Hayes?
Ishmael.
No, it was Ishmael.
Oh, right, Ishmael.
Yeah, thank you for that. And so I think what I had heard, I didn't read anything about this, but what I had heard when I was watching coaches talk about them and other trainers talk about them is Rocket Ishmael had this explosive, straight-on power, this speed that I believe, I'm not exactly sure, I believe he was faster than Deion Sanders. However, Deion had the ability to cut left and right and still had that speed. And so when you're a coach, right, when you're a coach, you're looking at somebody who has more than just one type of talent, I'm guessing, right?
Right. And of course, it depends on the sport. So something like football, where you have to change directions rapidly, or soccer, where you have to change directions rapidly and just explode out of those cuts. And some people are able to do it better than some people are able to do that better than others. I was driving into school one day, and I was listening to the sports radio in town, and the Grand Valley football coach was on and talking about his players in the upcoming season. And he pointed out for some of the players, it's you know, they would say he's got the right genetics. We just have to work on some of his skills. And these are coaches that are very successful because they've won a couple of national championships. And so, I mean, that's what when you cut right down to it, that's what the coaches look for. So whether looking at 40-yard dash times is a good metric of football playing ability, it gives coaches a pretty good idea of what somebody's physical abilities are, whether they're able to compete at those high levels.
So if you're a spectator watching a sport and you wonder why a coach makes a certain call for putting a particular player in a certain position or taking them out and putting somebody else in, they may be taking these factors into play. What we don't know that because we don't really necessarily know what to look for, right?
Well, sometimes, yeah, we don't know what to look for. And what we don't know watching from the outside is the interactions between the other players on the field, interactions between the players and the coaches. And I think other players know whether they can count on their teammates or not. Coaches know whether whether certain players can be counted on or not to come through in tough situations. So we just see their physical abilities, and we don't know some of the psychological issues that are involved, because all of those certainly impinge on performance.
Coming up next, I want you to talk about and we may have addressed this, but I really want you to sum up the show and give us what the take-home message is for anybody listening to the show today, whether they're a parent, they're going to be a parent, for themselves, their friends. What is the maybe top 5 things that we need to share with anybody who's trying to participate in a sport they're trying to excel in? And I'll let you take the last segment and share all of that with us, okay? So Dr. Michael Lombardo coming up next to finish up his thoughts about how you can excel in whatever it is that you're trying to perform. And so you gain that reward and continue with that, opposed to just giving up altogether, because the camaraderie, the lessons that you learn by being in a particular sport or excelling in one can be multifaceted in that they can benefit you in other aspects of your life, especially your professional life. So we'll talk more with Dr. Lombardo coming up next at 7:44, Sports Radio 1310 The Ticket. 7:51, Sports Radio 1310 The Ticket, George DiGianni Train Station Fitness Show. Talking with my guest, Dr. Michael Lombardo. We're discussing whether you have the innate talent, the innate speed to be in the specific sport you're in or want to be in, or if you're a parent, how you guide that child to be in the position that would be best for them, opposed to what you want them to be in. Dr. Lombardo, I asked if you had the top 5 things to surmise the show today and help people with the take-home message about what they can do with this information. How could they benefit themselves and even their family? And if you have more than 5, that's certainly fine. But go ahead.
Okay, so I think the best way to summarize what we've talked about this morning and some of the work that Rob Diener and I have done is first to realize that there's a tremendous amount of variation amongst people in their natural abilities. Some individuals are predisposed for sprint and power events. Some individuals are predisposed for endurance events. Some individuals have better eye-hand coordination than others, and so on. So what I think, and I'm going to sound more like a coach right now than a scientist, and I think the first thing is for individuals, whether they're athletes themselves or whether they have budding athletes in their households, is to identify those particular skills that any individual might have. So the idea then is to, instead of just play soccer year-round or play baseball year-round and play in developmental basketball leagues and so on, to the exclusion of other events, is to try lots of different sports and activities so that you identify those things that you're best at, probably because you are better at some things than at others. So that's the first point, is because of that variation, what we really need to do is identify what sort of skills that we have. And so that if we really want to focus on being an athlete, is to focus our efforts on those sports where we are most likely to be successful. Mm-hmm. And of course, the next step is then this idea that we talked about in our paper about deliberate practice and really dedicated effort at developing your skills and working hard and to be coachable in order to hone your skills. And one of the issues that many coaches often talk about in the sports science literature is whether athletes are coachable or not, because some athletes take coaching well and other athletes don't. But in order to improve, you really have to be coachable in order to hone your skills. And then the other main point is then to train hard to get the most out of your ability, so that at the end of the day, you say, I really gave it the best shot that I had. I worked as hard as I could at those things that I'm most likely to excel at, and I got to be as good as I could be, if that's what you want to do, and if that's what you want to do, if you want to become a whatever level athlete you want to become, whether you want to win a letter in high school, you want to get a college scholarship, you want to play at the professional level, you want to make the Olympics, play for the national team, or so on. If you don't do those things, and those different steps of identifying what you're good at, working hard, being coachable, at the end of the day, then you can say, well, I gave it my best shot. I have nothing to be, to regret, nothing to be sorry about. But if you don't do those things, then you can always get to the end, like most people, and say, well, if I only worked harder, if I'd only done this, only listened to this person, maybe I'd be somewhere else.
Right.
But the bigger, the part of the bigger message of our paper is that this idea of variation, that we all vary in what we're good at, and really part of life, especially athletic life, is trying to identify those sorts of things that we can do well.
We also see people who beat themselves up when they're playing a particular sport and they've not performed as well as they wanted to. And, we all have off days, and that's understandable if you have an off day. But if you're not doing well enough to play at the level you'd like to play, that elite level, then maybe you shouldn't beat yourself up as much, if at all. Maybe you should just give yourself a break. And it's recognizing, like you said, where this innate talent lies. What I wonder, Doc, and you may or may not do this, but I think it would be very beneficial to coaches and yourself alike, is to be a consultant to coaches. And they may already have people like this, I don't know, but being a consultant to coaches to say, look, you have this player in this position. While they're talented, I'll bet if you tried them over here and exercised their skills or honed their skills in this position here, that they would excel. Well, why would they excel, Doc? Well, let me tell you why. I think you would have both. It's a win-win situation for you, the player, and the coach.
Right. I think that's absolutely correct, and I think that the coaches that are most successful are able to identify their athletes that have the physical skills, and they also have the psychological makeups to succeed at whatever position they are placed in. And so, and I think this is a really important point of our paper, and it's in our last paragraph. And so imagine that you had a youngster who expressed a strong passion to become a world-class sprinter or play in the NFL, and played professional baseball, and they trained with great dedication under expert coaches for 10 years. But what our studies tell us is that despite that training, they may not realize or even approach their goals unless they have some extraordinary talent. But
let me interject for a moment. Some parents may be thinking, well, why should I take my child out of a specific sport that they like? They might not be doing well, but they like it. And I know we've not addressed that, and you would probably agree with me that if a child or even yourself enjoys a sport and you're the worst player on the team, it doesn't mean through everything that we've said today that you should stop playing the sport or take your child out of that sport if you enjoy it. But we're talking about if you're trying to get to an elite level, don't beat yourself up if you don't have that talent for that specific position and or sport.
Exactly right. So even if you're not good at a sport and you really enjoy playing it, keep doing it. I mean, I can't run anymore, so I cycle, and because I've more fast twitch than slow twitch muscle fibers, I'm never going to be a very good cyclist. But I enjoy it, so I keep doing it. But I'm not competing at it. But it's the same sort of thing. If you're trying to get to that elite level and you're not making it at that elite level, and you have all the coaching in the world and you're coachable, it may just simply mean that you don't have the physical wherewithal to compete at that level, and it doesn't really make sense to, as you say, to beat yourself up over
Right.
that because.
Dr. Lombardo, you've been a great guest today. Thank you for the information and sharing with us updated information, follow-up information to some of what we already knew, but some of what we didn't know and how we can enhance what we currently have or don't have and move in a direction that actually aligns with who we are on a physiological or a biological level. So I thank you for coming on the show today.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Bye-bye.